Welcome to Between the Sheets, the non-judgmental podcast where we're going to cover various sexual health and wellness topics. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Zwonitzer. I'm a urology and sexual health nurse practitioner, and I love helping my patients and listeners discover and develop their most satisfying sexual experiences. Between the Sheets is here to normalize the conversations about sexual health and cover everything from basic anatomy to the most taboo topics and everything in between. Real talk, real pleasure, one episode at a time. So come on, let's get between the sheets. This episode is sponsored by Boston Scientific and its educational website on erectile dysfunction, edcure.com. One study estimated that more than 50% of men over the age of 40 have some degree of erectile dysfunction, which can be frustrating and confusing. Go to edcure.com to find information on erectile dysfunction and treatment options, including long-term treatment options offered by Boston Scientific. Boston Scientific does not endorse any statements or opinions expressed during this episode. Hey guys, welcome back to Between the Sheets. We're going to cover an interesting topic today, one that I'm really excited about. You know, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, we really didn't talk about ADHD very often, and it is really important. And a lot of us now in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond are finding out that, hey, we actually have ADHD and didn't know this our entire lives. So I have an amazing guest here today, Jorie Houlihan, who is going to help us talk through this today. She is your guide for dopamine deprived, is an ADHD life coach, public speaker, and an educator who specializes in working with women diagnosed later in life. After living undiagnosed with ADHD until age 49, she brings a deep understanding of the unique challenges, strengths, and perspectives that come with this discovery. She's also the host of a new podcast, ADHD and Whatever. And that's going to have launched just a couple weeks ago on October 14th. She's going to have conversations that are heartfelt style, blends life experience with research-backed strategies. Her mission is to help ADHD women feel empowered by their ADHD so they can move from simply getting by to thriving. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I love what I do. So thank you so much for having me on here. As I've mentioned, this is not a topic that's talked about very often. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, me too, because I think, we're learning how much, especially those of us that, weren't diagnosed. I'm not clinically diagnosed. I just diagnosed myself, because just why not? But there are, just saying. So when you know enough of the side, the things, you're like, all right, well, maybe I should actually go talk to someone. And then, as women, we're very poor about going and taking care of ourselves because we take care of everyone else. So,
Yep.
but I think it's really unique in our generations that we weren't diagnosed early on and that some people are finding so much benefit in their life from getting diagnosed and learning the tools and the tricks and maybe medications and things like that. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah. And actually, sadly, it's still in girls. It is very missed a lot.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of doctors out there that think that it really just happens to boys. There are still doctors that think you can grow out of it. They think that if you have any modicum of success at all, you couldn't possibly have it. So my hope is that because so many women are now being diagnosed, that first of all, it's going to improve studies. That's my first hope.
Yep.
The other part of it is just because now there is so much more talk about it, people are starting to see it. Like I had to fight to get my daughter assessed, even though to me, once I was diagnosed and understood what it was, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, she absolutely has this. But they were still like, well, we don't know. And it was COVID, which complicated everything. But it is when women are finally given this diagnosis, I will tell you, it is such you feel so validated. Suddenly your life makes sense. It's like, okay, I'm not broken, right?
Yeah.
I have a brain difference and I need to figure out what that is. Sometimes women, when they're first diagnosed, they kind of go, okay, I'm diagnosed. And they kind of think something's going to change. I'm like, no, you still got to figure out how that works. But it is really validating and it helps to take the shame out of a lot of the things that they feel. We're told most of our lives we were, doing it wrong or whatever. And it's just we just have a different operating system. So we just approach things differently and there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to figure out what that looks like for you. So I originally didn't think I would do medication when I was first
Mhm.
diagnosed. And then a friend who had actually helped convince me to get assessed a few months later, she's like, "You haven't started med yet, have you?" And I was like, "Is it that obvious?" And so I was like, "Okay." And so I try to completely change my life. But I
Yeah.
also know that not everybody wants to do medication. Not everybody can do medication. So, I work with people where they are. I want women to feel empowered with what they have going on up there
Mhm.
and not a victim of it. So, and the fact that so many women are now getting assessed and getting diagnosed is helping women feel less alone,
Mhm.
and that alone can feel empowering.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think having the diagnosis, like you said, where there's not something like quote unquote wrong with me. I'm not broken. I just have my brain that operates differently. One of my best friends gets in like that frozen mode where there's so much to do and she can't decide where to start. And so she just doesn't do anything. And she'll just sit
Yeah.
there and play on her phone or whatever. And then, I'll come over and she'll be like, I haven't folded laundry in a week, or I haven't been able to clean my house because there's so much I have to do that I can't figure out where to start. And it was so interesting to talk to her through that because I'm much more methodical in like a cleaning of the house or whatever. Now, I will totally get distracted and go from, taking the trash out to walking by three things in the basement and starting a totally different track. But at the end of the day, my whole house got cleaned. So, I think, everybody experiences things differently, but that was really interesting to me to understand that that can be part of ADHD.
Oh, yeah. That's what we call ADHD paralysis. And it's just that overwhelm. Overwhelm is a big component. The name of the condition is actually really misleading because we don't actually have a deficit of attention. Our brain actually wants to pay attention to everything.
Yeah.
We aren't always able to regulate where it goes, which is
Mhm.
why we can struggle to focus, but then we also have hyperfocus,
Yeah.
right? And so what your friend experienced is really common, first of all. And that tends to be where a lot of the shame stuff comes in because they're
Mhm.
like, why can't I do this? How I explain it to people is while the rest of the world was born with a PC brain, we were born with Macs.
I like
But
it. I like it.
having the Mac brain, though, isn't the actual issue. The issue is that we were given the PC manual to work with.
Mm.
And so I'm like, you're not broken. You've just been using the wrong owner's manual.
Yeah.
And so when they go, well, that makes more sense, right? Like if you hit certain keys on a Mac keyboard versus a PC, it ain't going to happen the same, right?
Right.
So it just helps them to better go, okay, I just see things differently.
Yeah.
And that overwhelm is very common and but it's like what you said, it's a spectrum. There are
Mhm.
some people that, that is a daily thing for them and it is really debilitating. And for
Yeah.
other people, it may happen every once in a while, but they have bigger issues with maybe impulsivity,
Mhm.
or the hyperactivity part. So
Mhm.
it really just depends on the person.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's such a broad, generalized diagnosis for such varied thing. I mean, you think about like the autism spectrum too. Like there's people who are like super functional and great with their autistic characteristics. And then there are people who
Mhm.
are on the far other end who can barely survive on their own. They're very, nonverbal, things like that. And I think that that's very similar to the ADHD spectrum. You have some people who like almost use it as a superpower and are super successful and great. And then you have the, paralyzing days and you have where you just can't figure out your next step. I think it's interesting to see how varied there is with this one umbrella diagnosis.
Yeah. And so what's interesting is they used to say that if you had autism, you couldn't have ADHD.
Mhm.
And now it's called ADHD, which is where you
Mm,
have both. And
yeah,
that's actually much more common than they realize. Like that's my son. So,
yeah.
and he's very high functioning, but it's just that is another layer.
Mhm,
And so when you kind of put all that together and then you also add just like what your family dynamics were, right?
mhm,
ADHD is very heritable. So, generally speaking, if one parent has it, almost always at least one of the kids has it. And so, if you are a parent who doesn't know you have ADHD, and now you're trying to
mm,
parent a kid who has ADHD, again, there's so many
right.
layers upon this. But most people tend to think of ADHD as, getting easily distracted, squirrel and
Right,
losing things. And I'm like, those are kind of the least of my problems almost. Like,
right.
out of sight, out of mind is by far my biggest problem. But when you can start to understand how your brain works, then so many so like with your friend, for example, if she would start to go, okay, I'm feeling this overwhelm, I'm feeling paralyzed. Let me ask myself some questions, right? When you can get to that place where you can go, okay,
Uh-huh.
I'm not broken, but I'm definitely feeling resistance. What am I feeling resistance to? Right? And you just ask yourself, does this feel too big? How can I break
Mhm.
this down so it feels more manageable? Does it feel like it's going to take too much time? How can we
Mm.
break that down so it's more manageable? Is it too vague? Am I not sure where the next step is, right? Or what it is? Or maybe the task is just boring and there's no
Yeah.
dopamine in it. And that's a very real problem for us.
Yeah.
We have to have some interest in it. And if you don't, you have to find ways to sort of gamify things, right? Pair it up with something you do like to do. So like
Uh,
I went for laundry is my nemesis. And so there are times where I will be like, okay, this mound of laundry is just getting bigger and it's taunting me every time I walk by.
mhm.
What am I going to do? And I'll be like, all right, I'm just going to fold or hang 3 things. That's it. Go
Mhm.
from there. Well, I do 3 things and that's pretty okay. Let me do 3 more. Okay, 3 more. Right. And the next thing you know, it's done. But if I do
Yeah.
the 3 things and then I really can't, I did what I committed to
Mhm.
and I can start again later. Right. And
Yeah.
I've learned how to take that shame element out of it to be
Mhm.
like, this is what I'm capable of right now. And that's okay because ADHD energy is very different than neurotypical energy
Mhm.
because it takes much more energy to get us out of inertia
Okay.
because that's where dopamine comes into play, right?
Mhm.
Because dopamine is the thing that gets you to do the thing. And
Right.
since our baseline is lower to get us to do the thing, unless we do, if we're interested in it, if it's novel, if it's challenging or urgent, those are 4 things that will get us going.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's much trickier. And that's where
Yeah.
then, like I said, gamifying things, trying to find ways to make it a little more fun, getting some external accountability is a
Mhm.
requirement, in my opinion. But I always want people to say, you know what? Okay, I'm feeling this. It is what it is. What am I noticing? Where am I feeling it in my body?
Mhm.
Right? Because our body also tells us a lot and we
Yeah.
kind of underestimate that. Um, but that was a very long-winded way of, I think, answering your question.
Yeah, no, I love that because it's like I'm like shooting ideas as you're saying all of these things because it's so relatable, right? It is regardless of whether or not you truly have ADHD, you've had moments of this. And to know that someone doesn't just have moments, but they live like that on a daily basis, I think can help all of us be a little bit more empathetic and give a little bit more grace because that's scary sometimes, I'm sure, to have a big project that you're supposed to get done for work and feel so frozen and not know where to start and having to, like you said, this extra energy to even get the ball going where someone else might be able to sit down, do their outline, do their timeline, da 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 da, and like, a week later, they've knocked everything out of the park.
Yes, and that actually that's a good point because so most of us were the I did my term paper the night before
Mhm.
people. And that's that urgency, right?
Yeah.
And as a result, we sort of trained our bodies and our brains to need that.
Mhm.
But as an adult, you can't live that way. Like
Right.
for work, it's unprofessional. There's usually people waiting on something you're working on, et cetera. And it just on a physical level, it raises
Mhm.
blood pressure, cortisol levels, all these things that are just unhealthy over time.
Yeah.
And, but that is where that comes from. It's like that, oh gosh, I have to get this done. And then you feel this pressure, and then that pressure gets overwhelming. And then for a lot of us, we shut down until we
Mhm.
have to do it. And then we'll knock it all out, at the end. But is it really going to be the quality of work that you would have had if you had started earlier? But because of time blindness, which that's a whole other thing, we
Yeah.
we struggle to see the future, which not that anybody can see the future, but
Mhm.
our brain can't get there in a way that neurotypical people can.
Okay.
So in ADHD world, there's now and there's not now, and not now doesn't exist.
Sure.
So your project for work, for example, is in not now land. Your brain's not even going there. It's dealing with what's
Yeah.
happening right now. And so that is one of those challenges where you have to say, okay, now I have to think ahead of time.
Right.
And so it's a new way of having to look at it for people who've always waited till the last minute. And when I first started doing that, I remember feeling like something isn't right. I know I'm forgetting something. This was too easy. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't used to being ahead of schedule, right? I
Right.
was used to always framing things in at the last minute. So it feels weird in the beginning, but once you start to do it, you start to really appreciate it. I still have to consciously make the effort to do it.
Hmm.
It's not like an ingrained thing in me, but now that I understand the benefits and have experienced the benefits of it, it's a little bit easier for me to do it that way.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So, how do you see ADHD in relationships and the effects on relationships? I mean, it could be friendships and things like that as well, but I'm thinking more of like your intimate relationships where, sex is involved, you need to make time for each other, things like that. How are you seeing ADHD affect those relationships?
So, ADHD is, as I said, it impacts everything. And this is
Hmm.
one of those areas. A lot of times so a common thing that will happen during sex is the mind will wander.
Hmm.
And it has nothing to do with the performance of your partner.
Hmm.
It could simply be, I'm really getting into this. And then it reminds you of something that happened years ago. And then your mind starts going down there and blah, blah. And all of a sudden you're like at your to do list.
Hmm.
And then you're like, shoot. And then you're criticizing yourself. You're still not going back into the moment because now you're feeling bad because your mind wandered. And does he know? Blah, blah, blah. And that, of course, takes away from the intimacy as well, right? And it's so common, though. I really want women to understand that. That is really common. And so what I encourage women to do when that happens is to just be like, okay, my mind wandered. It happens. Okay, let's just get back into it. Don't worry
Hmm.
about whether or not he knows or she knows or whoever. Just, you know, just I try to tell people, look at everything through the lens of curiosity and
Mm.
not judgment. Because
Yeah.
when we go into that, "Oh gosh, do they know? Da da da," we're judging ourselves,
Right.
right? Whereas if we're like, "Oh, that was interesting. Okay, let's get back into this." That's more of
Yeah.
like the lighthearted, curious part of it. And
Okay.
it's much easier for that. But also, we have sensory issues, right?
Mm.
Sometimes certain like things that maybe your partner wants you to wear feel really uncomfortable on your skin,
Mm.
right? Or maybe the romantic music they're playing to try to get you into the mood is actually really distracting for you. Sometimes we get really overstimulated. And that's
Mm.
another time where I think the mind wanders because it's just the brain's way of going, this is too much.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to articulate it. I think being open with your partner about
Mhm.
stuff, and I have been guilty of holding back from telling my husband things because I don't want to hurt his feelings or whatever.
Sure.
And it has nothing to do with his performance at all. But there's also like, I've mentioned shame comes up a lot, and this is definitely
Mhm.
one of those areas. But if you can openly communicate about things you do like, what you don't like, right?
Mhm.
That helps. As I mentioned before, out of sight, out of mind can be a problem in ADHD, and that includes sex.
Okay.
Every relationship has its ebbs and flows. And if maybe you're just in one of those places where like you're just kind of not in the mood a lot and it just isn't happening, as an ADHD person, your brain is just not going to go there.
Mm.
Your partner's going to have to be the one to kind of say, "Hey, let's do this."
Right, you haven't touched me in 3 days.
Yeah, right. And so it's just when you start to see what your patterns are with it, when you start to
Mhm.
understand, our hormones play such a big role in all of this too.
Mm.
Dopamine is connected to estrogen. So when estrogen drops, our dopamine drops, right?
Mm. Mhm.
So I'm in menopause now. I'm
Yeah.
54. And a couple years ago, I was complaining to my gynecologist that I have zero sex drive.
Mm.
And I wasn't officially in menopause yet. And unfortunately, her response wasn't great. It was like, well, there's no female Viagra.
Yeah.
Some people schedule it in. I'm like, yeah, you don't really know how ADHD works, do you?
Right.
The scheduling part alone. But also, if we're not interested, if nothing's going on down there, we're just not,
Yeah.
there's no interest. We're not going to do it.
Right.
And so, again, understanding that and then trying to find things like HRT worked for me really well. Some
Okay.
people can't do that. So you just have to find
Right.
other ways to do it. But yeah, it tends to get worse when we don't communicate. That part I will say.
Mhm.
If you're with somebody who takes it personally, if some of these things happen, even though it has nothing to do with them,
Mhm.
that should probably tell you something too.
Yeah.
Um, it's complicated because there's lots of layers.
Yeah.
Because then we also have just not even the ADHD stuff. Like if you were brought up with any kind of religion, I was brought up Catholic. I'm
Mhm.
still unwrapping some of that stuff, right?
Yes.
All of that plays into it
Good old
as well.
Catholic
So,
guilt.
God,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I mean, it's so true. And there's so much shame around sex, period, because we
right.
have this purity culture. And even if you weren't raised in a religious household, just the way that sex is talked about in the United States
Mm,
itself. Women are used for sex in the media, in movies, things like that. It's about the male pleasure, right? We don't talk about the female pleasure. We don't talk
right.
about exploring yourself as a woman, but male masturbation is talked about all the time. So there's a lot of shame around sex without ADHD. And then you add in those components, and I can see how freezing that could be and how maybe even ostracizing, like there's something wrong with me, I'm not normal because
Yeah,
it doesn't just come naturally to me to want sex, to think about it, to initiate it with my partner. That's gotta
right.
be really frustrating.
Yeah, and the thing is that along with, like, we can't always regulate our attention, we also deal with emotional dysregulation,
Mhm.
and we also sometimes you will go from being, like, hypersexual, where that's all you think about,
Mm,
to hyposexual and back. Again, we can't always regulate that,
yeah.
and that's the thing that I really hope that people will understand is that when you can just learn to work with it wherever it
Yeah.
is at that point, but know that it's not there's nothing wrong with you. Now, if
Mhm.
the hypo, for example, lasts a really long time, then maybe you wanna talk to a doctor or look
Mhm.
at your relationship or whatever, but the ebbs and flows are normal. It's just that we feel things a lot more intensely. We take it more personally.
Mhm.
We are also innately people pleasers, which is not usually a good thing.
Yeah.
And so it's always about, like you said, it's always about making sure the other person, if you're in a heterosexual relationship and
Right.
a woman, making sure that your man is taken care of, et cetera. So, like with my gynecologist's response to that, it was about, well, just do this basically so he's happy. And
Right.
I was like, well, what about making me fucking happy? Like,
Right.
where am I
Exactly.
in this? And
Yes.
so it was so frustrating. And
Right.
and but again, at that time I don't think I realized it was part of my menopause. I thought there was
Mhm.
something wrong with me, or was I falling out of love with my husband? Like I didn't
Right.
know what was going on.
Yeah. And
And
the old
and
adages of just have a glass of wine and relax, things like that, they don't work.
no, they don't. And in fact, they will make them worse most of the time.
Yeah.
It is really about I know I keep saying this, but it really is about just sort of understanding what your patterns are, what your
Mhm.
interests are. Because the other thing about ADHD that's actually really great, I don't want people to think this is all gloom and doom.
Yeah.
We are really creative people. And I don't
Mhm.
necessarily mean artistically, although there are a whole lot of artists with ADHD.
Mhm.
But we are people who we are creative problem solvers. We think outside the box. So maybe it is your relationship's gotten a little stale and things are a little
Mhm.
boring. And maybe because it's boring, there's no dopamine in it for you. Maybe that is why.
Yeah.
Maybe you can be the one who's like, all right, let's try something new. Let's get a little
Yeah.
more adventurous. Or let's go try, like, maybe let's just go stay at a hotel one weekend or
Mhm.
just do something different to just change things up because we are also the more spontaneous person usually. So we can be like, all right, let's just do this now. Now, obviously,
Mhm.
when you have kids, it's a little harder to do some of that stuff, but it is just another way of thinking about it in terms of it doesn't always have to be gloom and doom.
Mhm.
But when you start to recognize again what is going on with you and to say, you know what, I think maybe this is a little boring. Let's change things up.
Yeah.
Now, going back to what we were talking about with religion and shame, changing things up may force you out of your comfort zone a bit.
Mhm.
And I definitely have pushed back on that myself. But you may find whole new thing that you actually really like too. And if you
Yeah.
don't, then and it's all good.
Right. Absolutely. And I love what you were saying about the connection with the estrogen too, because and we've talked about menopause many times on this podcast. As your estrogen depletes, obviously it's having an effect on your ADHD, it's having an effect on your libido, it's having an effect on how your body is responding, the elasticity of your vagina, all of these different things. And so I'm a huge proponent of HRT, bioidentical preferred. And the other thing that you mentioned that your gynecologist said to you, there's no female Viagra. There actually is a fabulous medication out for women who have that hyposexual desire. It's another neurochemical issue in their brain. And so there's a medication called Addyi, and it's
Mm.
fabulous. It actually really works on that to increase your desire and your ability to get aroused. So it's not
Oh,
about
that's so
like,
good to know.
yeah, it's really fabulous. It's not like the blood flow issue. Like Viagra is just about helping you have blood flow. It doesn't work on your libido. It doesn't do anything like that. So it's not exactly the female Viagra, but it
Yeah.
helps. It helps with the desire. And it's amazing how if you just get women to want it because they actually want it, how
Right.
much more responsive they are, how much better their arousal is. The vagina will elongate and lubricate better because they're more interested. And then you throw some HRT in there and you get our estrogen back up. Man, now women are rocking and having some of the best sex they've ever had in their late 40s, 50s, and beyond, which is amazing. And I love that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
really good
it's
to know.
yes,
Gonna have
yes.
to talk to my gynecologist about that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so it's really interesting, like you were saying earlier about the research. Women, we've talked about that on this podcast before. Women weren't even required to be in research until the 1990s. I mean, that's
I know.
within our lifetime. And that's just so sad. And so then, okay, now we've got women in research, but that was a very broad spectrum, like just a few women here and there, kind of like DEI, like make sure you have some women in there.
Yeah.
So now we're finally getting to where we have research about women and for women and focused on women, which is fabulous. And we're finally getting the due diligence to female care that we've deserved. We're not small versions of men. We are
Oh,
completely
seriously.
different entities with different neurotransmitters and hormones and different ways of processing
We have
things.
different biologies and
100%.
different metabolisms, different
Mhm.
hormones. Like there's just stuff that's different. And so, like I said, I that makes me very hopeful because so many
Mhm.
women have been diagnosed. Hopefully, there are being more studies done that include women because, like I said,
Yeah.
so many people, including teachers, including,
Mhm.
people who are authority figures when our kids are younger, they're still looking for boy symptoms in girls.
Mhm.
And so when I'm like, hey, no, like girls' hyperactivity is more like being really chatty and
Mhm.
interrupting a lot. Or maybe, if they're more the inattentive, it's they've got the messy desk.
Yeah.
They seem like they're daydreaming a lot, right? Things like
Mhm.
that. Because boy symptoms are just very outward and
Mhm.
disruptive, and that's why they're caught so early. And then, of course, we get into masking. That's a whole
Right.
other thing, right? We're taught to mask from like conception. And so
Right.
girls become girls become really good at hiding their symptoms, which makes
Mhm.
it even more difficult for people in authority to see what's going on. They have to look at things like the messiness and kind of go, okay, well, there might be something going on there.
Yeah.
But that isn't happening yet.
Right.
So, like I said, I'm hoping with more studies being done for women that this will start to change that conversation.
Mhm.
I actually am talking with a woman. She goes into schools and she talks about this kind of
Mm.
thing
Yeah.
because she's been a teacher and she sees the disparity. She doesn't just talk about ADHD, but she talks about a lot of these things. But she said, yeah, they're still looking for boy symptoms in girls. Absolutely.
Mm.
So, if you're a teacher out there, look for girl symptoms in girls. That's what we're looking for. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so important. And I think, going back to the sex part of it, so interesting what you were saying about, not feeling shame that your brain wandered and just kind of finding a way to pull yourself back into that moment. Do you have any other tips or tricks for ladies kind of in those times where I really want to be focused? I really want to be here right now, but I keep going other places?
so this has been my experience both with myself and with clients is the harder you try to be focused, the less focused you are going to be. So, sometimes if you have a lot going on in your life, it's just going to happen more often.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it is just simply you're just going to have to let it happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you know you're in that place, right? Sometimes doing a little, it sounds weird, but like pre work, sort
Mm-hmm.
of, okay, I really want to be focused with my partner when we're doing this. Let me do a brain dump,
Mm-hmm.
get stuff out of my head so that maybe then it will be less likely to bleed in when we're being intimate.
Mm-hmm.
Most of all, though, just have some compassion for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it just happens. And again, if you're with the right person, they're going to understand. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of a new thing to talk about because we
Mm-hmm.
usually don't talk about, sorry, I got distracted during sex. It's really not you,
Right.
I promise.
Right.
But it isn't really them. And
Yeah.
so, but sometimes just doing some mental preparation ahead of time too. But the more, like I said, the more you try to focus,
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to go in the other direction. At least that's been the experience that with my clients that we've talked about this and with myself. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not just with sex, it's really with anything, but
Yeah.
definitely with this too. Because there's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
then I have to be focused. I have to be focused. Well, when
Mhm.
you're doing that, guess what? You're not focused. You're thinking, I need to be focused. And then you're
Right.
still not in the moment. And the other thing that I would probably say is earlier I mentioned, like, if they're feeling resistance to doing something and saying, where
Mhm.
is this in your body?
Mm.
Same thing, kind of saying, okay, where can I relax? What's feeling really tense right now?
Yeah.
Especially if you're already kind of in it, right? What
Mhm.
can I relax a little bit right now? And again, you're not necessarily present because you're thinking this, but
Right.
when you can start to relax certain areas of your body, sometimes just that alone can
Yeah.
help kind of relax the rest of everything. And those are probably the biggest things that I would say. And
Mhm.
again, just have some compassion for yourself. Don't judge yourself. We are sometimes
Yeah.
our own worst bullies. The things we
Yes.
say to ourselves, we would never say to another person.
Right.
So
Right.
talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend.
Yeah. I two things off of what you're saying. The first thing is back to what you were saying about having a partner and communicating. There are times where my brain goes, and luckily I have a fabulous boyfriend, and I will just be like, "Hey, remind me later I need to do this." And he'll be like, "Okay, could you focus now, please?" Like, we just crack up and laugh in the middle of sex because like my brain it'll go, and I'll be like, "I know I don't want to focus on that right now. So could you just remind me later that I need to talk about this?" And he'll be like, "Yeah, whatever. Could you just keep, like
Yeah.
okay, got it. No problem. Thank you. But like that's for me, that's how I've learned that I need to just spew it out in that moment. And I may or may not remember it later, but I just need to get it out so I can keep focusing and have fun. So
Yes.
luckily, my partner
Yes.
knows that that is no shame against him and what he's doing to me in that moment. It's just me and the way that I
Sometimes,
function.
yeah.
I
Sometimes
just
those
need to
thoughts,
get it
they
out.
just come in. I think one time I was just like, do we have this in the fridge? And
Right.
my husband's like, where are you right now?
Right.
I'm like, apparently in the fridge.
Yeah,
Like, like,
exactly.
yeah. If you can have a
Yeah.
sense of humor about all of this, it is
Yes.
incredibly helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, like, just have a sense of humor. It's funny,
Absolutely.
there's
Yep.
no to me, there is no normal, I'm always like, "Who
Right.
decides what's normal?" And then to me,
Right.
boring people decide what's normal. So, just do your version of normal and
Yeah.
be good because that's
Absolutely.
gonna be the best thing you can do for yourself and your relationship.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I thought about goes back to how we were saying that, being raised in a purity culture, we don't touch ourselves enough. And I think
Mhm.
that this comes into play for what you're talking about. So if you practice by yourself of staying in that moment, or what happens when you do have these fleeting thoughts, what feels the best to you, what gets you, boom, right back in that moment, and you kind of figure those things out by yourself, then when you are with your partner and you start to wander, you're like, oh yeah, when I touch myself exactly like this, or when I pinch my nipple, or when I do whatever, it helps me refocus. Then you know how to do those things in that moment, and you can kind of like, you've already practiced it. So then it becomes more natural to do it in those moments.
I love that. I love that. You're right. That is
Hmm.
exactly it's like a little bit of a rehearsal,
Yeah.
and you get pleasure out of it while you're doing
Right.
it. So,
Hmm. Yes,
but you're right.
absolutely.
We're taught, like, especially with, I don't know about any of the other religions, but I know in Catholic,
Hmm.
don't touch yourself and da da da
Yep.
da da. And it is seen as sort of this, this taboo thing.
Hmm.
But that is absolutely true. I love
Hmm.
that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's
That's a
so
great idea.
important. It is. And and the other thing about that is it doesn't have to sex or personal time lead to and climax. Pleasure, there are so many other ways to enjoy pleasure that if that particular session with yourself or with your partner doesn't lead to a full-blown orgasm, that's okay. What did you enjoy about that session? What did you learn about yourself during that session? Did you learn that, "Ooh, I don't really like the way that that texture felt. I really liked this amount of pressure versus that amount of pressure." You don't have to climax every single time, and that's okay. So if you do get distracted or the doorbell rings, the neighbor stops by, whatever, and you didn't get to finish that session fully, that's okay. What did you
Yeah.
enjoy about it? And what did you learn?
Well, and that also brings up another point, which is people with ADHD tend to have all or nothing thinking. So we feel like we have to finish all of it sometimes
Yeah.
because that's just where our brain goes, right? So that is a very good point. I am constantly having to remind my clients that's all or nothing thinking. We
Right.
don't have to do this full thing. You can do a portion of it, right? And that
Yeah.
applies with sex too, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, you don't sometimes it's almost more fun to do like a necking session. Necking,
Yeah.
I'm dating myself, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Good
but
old make
it's
out.
just
Yeah.
Yeah, a good old makeout session, and get yourself all hot and bothered and
Yeah.
then stop because then, it's like back to, when you were, more
Yeah.
innocent in terms of that kind of stuff. Or it's not that you're
Yeah.
not innocent as an adult, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, and what you were saying about, this all goes back to dopamine. Maybe a quick little makeout session gets your dopamine going, and now a half hour later, once the neighbor left, you're ready to go back and have a great session, and you're in the mood, and you want to do more and things like that. So I think it's one of those things that can be kind of like a snowball effect.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's sort of like with the laundry. I did a
Hmm.
little bit. Okay, I got some done. Okay, I can do a little more. I can do a little
Yeah.
more. Like cuz each of those is like checking off a little checkbox, right? Like we
Yep.
love lists even
Hmm.
though we either lose them or forget to look at them, but we have them and when we remember to look at them,
Hmm.
every time we check off the box, it's a little dopamine and a lot of us will
Yep.
even go back and add things to the list that we've already done that wasn't on the list
Yeah.
because it gives us dopamine.
I do that all the time. I'm like, wait, that wasn't on my list. Let me write it there so I can cross it off.
All the time.
Yes.
And so in a way, that's sort of the same thing. It's like, okay, we'll just
Yeah.
do a little bit, see how it goes.
Yeah.
If you just do the little bit and that's all you got in you, that's
Hmm.
okay.
Yep.
You did, I think too, a lot of women, well, people with ADHD, I don't want to say it's just women, but sometimes it feels like just another task. And what
Mm.
people don't realize is so like if you're talking to a neurotypical person, they see laundry, for example, as a task.
Yeah.
I see it as I got to go get the clothes. I have to sort the clothes. I have to decide which one I'm going to wash first. I have to put it in the washer.
Mm.
I have to put the soap in. But it's lots of steps. And it's sort
Mhm.
of the same thing with this. And because we have time blindness and we're never really sure how long something's going to take, that adds to that too.
Yeah.
And so sometimes with sex, it's sort of like, okay, well, do we have time? Because first we're going to do, and it can't just be sex as one task.
Yeah.
And so that's just another way to help people better understand why we sometimes will get overwhelmed with it if we feel like it's a lot of things and we've got already a lot going on. But then going back to what you just said about like, it doesn't have to always end up in a
Mhm.
climax. It can just be a little bit of, making out. Fine.
Yeah.
That's doable. So learning to work with your energy and where you are at any given time is really important because as I mentioned before, ADHD energy is very different. And a lot of times we try to push through
Yeah.
when we don't have that energy. And part of it is because we're afraid of being called lazy
Mhm.
because we've gotten that label before. And also, again, when we're talking about intimacy, it's also people pleasing and we're
Mhm.
very empathetic and we want our partner to feel good and we don't want to hurt their feelings. But you got to also work with what works for you too.
Yeah.
So just don't be afraid to like make yourself a priority in this. And I feel
Mhm.
like that we still don't do that enough. I think we are still very much about, the partner. And it's not that we should, neglect the partner,
Mhm.
obviously, but it's okay for you to want to feel
Yeah.
good too. Right.
Right.
So, um,
Yeah, and women, there is a large group of women that have responsive desire. They will not just want sex, but if they read a novel, if they listen to a certain thing, if their partner touches them in certain ways, if they take their everything shower, whatever it might be, they can start to get turned on and then all of a sudden they are raring to go. And so I like the way that you compared it to let's just do three things of laundry. So it doesn't have to say, I'm going to have sex right now, but maybe it's just, I'm going to listen to my audiobook that has a nice, sexy scene in it while I do those three pieces of laundry. And then, whatever. And so, like, by the time you've done a couple of these things, all of a sudden your arousal is there because you've responded to, a certain touch from your partner or the makeout session or whatever. And now you've got that little bit of more dopamine. So now you've got a little bit more energy and now you can do that one next step. And so that really it goes hand in hand with women's responsive desire is a lot of the ADHD things that you've been talking about. And so women who have both, man, you really got to take your time, man.
yeah, I know, right?
Cut yourself
Well,
some slack.
seriously. Well, and what a lot of people don't realize, I don't honestly know if it's this. I don't think this is how it is for neurotypical people. But I will tell you, for people with ADHD, your motivation does not come first ever. The
Mm,
momentum comes first, and that's what brings the motivation. So that's why you have to kind of find those things that are going to get you started to get you to do the thing because the
mhm,
dopamine is too low, right?
sure.
And so that's why I like the gamifying or doing the like do 3 things or whatever,
Mhm.
that's what gets momentum going. Then you get the motivation. Like, okay, now I'm going. Now I'm like feeling good. Okay, let's do
Yeah.
this. And it's the same thing. It's like, don't think you're just going to want to have sex. Like,
Right.
sometimes you're just not. But like you said, like if you start doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, or reading a book or whatever, it will be like, okay, like
Yeah.
now I'm ready to go. Don't expect it to just be there. And whether it's sex or really anything else that you have to do, uh,
Yeah.
know that the motivation is going to come once you get the momentum for us. So
Yeah.
that's also one of the reasons that our energy is different.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so cool to talk about this because I think you said it right at the beginning. It's not talked about enough. It's not known well enough.
Hmm.
But it is so cool I love the way our brains work, whether you're neurotypical or not, which I think very few people are actually neurotypical. I think most people have something else going on in there. But, I think it's so cool to see that no matter where you are and how your brain processes things, we can still find ways to find pleasure and enjoyment in life and to check the boxes and do the things. So I really appreciate this conversation and kind of talking through some of the ways to allow women with ADHD to find those pleasure moments.
Well, thank you for asking me to talk about this. Like I said, it
Yeah.
isn't something that's talked about, and I want to take the shame out of all of it. And I want women to feel empowered, however that shows up for you. And, sometimes it's just little things like go make out with your boyfriend,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I love it. I'll write that down for my to-do list today.
Okay.
My
I
boyfriend
know.
will
So
say
they're going,
thank you.
okay. I know. I'm like, okay, hey, honey, I'm almost done.
Right.
Oh.
I love it. Okay, so what do you want people to know about how to connect with you, where your podcast is? Go ahead and plug yourself here for a minute.
Sure. So you'll find most of anything about me. My website is joriehoulihan.com. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. I do reels a lot, things like that. My handle for most of those is also Jorie Houlihan, or just type in Jorie Houlihan and things come up.
Mhm.
The podcast is called ADHD and I believe you can find it through Jorie Houlihan, but it's also at the ADHD and podcast.com. That's it. I'm
Awesome.
kind of
Very exciting.
everywhere. So
Yeah, I love that. Super easy to find. So we'll put
yes.
all of that in the show notes as well. So you don't have to try and remember that as you're maybe driving or watching this or whatever. Thank you so much, Jory, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really great.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, everybody, go have a great week and go have some fun between the sheets. Thank you for joining us and exploring sexual health topics here on Between the Sheets. New episodes are available every Wednesday. Please subscribe and rate our podcast so we can reach more listeners. And don't forget to tell your friends, partners, and anyone who will listen about Between the Sheets. Send any comments, questions, or stories to podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. It's all one word, podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and go have some fun between the sheets.